Well, welcome back, everybody. I am so happy to have a great conversation today with Adam Rabinovich. He just told me, and I just got nervous because that's what happens when you start recording. But he's going to correct me if I said it wrong. But today we're going to jump in and talk about leadership from a slightly different perspective than what we usually do. We usually kind of take the position of leaders and kind of the assumption we're in a corporate for-profit environment. And today what we're going to do is tap into Adam's tremendous 30 plus years of experience leading within a nonprofit space to really talk about what leadership means in that environment and what maybe we can learn from a different perspective. So welcome, Adam. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kimberly, and you pronounced my last name perfectly, so I appreciate that.
Thank goodness. I started sweating there. It was like a deer in headlights moment. So go ahead and tell our audience a little bit more about yourself. Like, what are the things that, stand out for you in your career?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity and for inviting me to share a bit about my reflections from a now 30-year career in counting when we're recording this in early 2025. My first couple of chapters were actually in the for-profit private sector, so-called single bottom line work, and I'll explain a little bit of what I mean by that when I talk about the last 15 years of my career. So when I look back, I've been really focused on chasing my passion. So figuring out what it is that I care about in this world and trying to make a difference around
Mhm.
that. And as of yet, again, as of when we're recording, I haven't yet had my own entrepreneurial light bulb moment. So instead of starting my own business or baby, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, I've had the honor to join teams and work with visionary founders in almost all cases and help them to charge forward, lead forward, and hopefully to sustain. So 15 years in the private sector, first in the music industry, then in the healthcare industry. And the last 15 years, I've been really focused on mission-driven work. So a lot of that has meant leading nonprofit corporations of all kinds, always with a mission that's close to my heart so that I can stay inspired and really grounded to the work. And we can talk more about what some of those cultures have looked like, what some of the businesses have
Yeah.
been focused on, and culture matters in every case. So that's a little bit about my first 30 years and counting.
Well, there's so much in there that I kind of want to dig into a little bit because I do like that you started your career in for profit because I think it gives you a very unique perspective on the different cultures that do exist. So there are some similarities because I, like you, started my career. I've done some nonprofit work earlier on in my career and then kind of have done the opposite of you, have shifted over into more of that for-profit space. So there are some things that are very similar. There are some things that are dramatically different. And so I think I would love to start with, from your perspective, what makes leading in a nonprofit culture unique?
Great question. So the unique aspect that I found is, and I've led a few different nonprofit corporations. I'll keep calling them that because they are enterprises, businesses. One coach or friend taught me that nonprofit isn't a business model, meaning we need money to sustain and scale the work that we do. Nonprofit is in the American IRS tax exemption code. So a nonprofit culture, what it really means is that there are one and then more, let's call them an army of folks who coalesce around solving a critical human need. And lots of for-profit businesses do that, and there's plenty of hybrid models too. But when looking at a nonprofit model, it's really always mission first, second, and third. And while that is a wonderful way to move through the world and to try, and in some cases accomplish, really existential foundational social goals, whether it's reducing poverty or solving healthcare challenges, the mission sometimes subsumes all, and then the enterprise, the model that needs to stick around until that mission gets accomplished, sometimes takes a back seat. And I can talk more about some
Yeah.
specific examples of when the mission becomes the beast that eats the model.
Oh, so it's funny because I've worked for a large nonprofit.
Hmm.
And I actually had a vendor tell me once that our nonprofit operated more like a for-profit than some of the for-profits they had seen, just based on how our culture existed. So I'm glad that you made that distinction, because I think when most people think of nonprofits, they think of like little mom and pop businesses with like a skeleton crew, which is very true. There are some nonprofits that exist that are incredibly small, or like maybe are barely keep like living off of grants, trying barely have enough cash to keep the lights on. But that doesn't describe all nonprofit organizations and how, because like I think some of the larger ones, they're international, they're massive. You're talking multi-million dollar budgets. So I like that we started there, is that when you think of nonprofit, to challenge maybe one, the assumption you're making about what it looks like and how it operates. And then two, thinking through the idea that mission is what drives it first. So if that is the goal, if that is the incentive of like kind of a core difference, where does profit play a role?
Profit plays a role in being able to invest and reinvest in the organization. And so examples of that are when, I'll assume, and not if, a nonprofit corporation is able to um, diversify, increase and scale its revenue while still making smart and strategic investments in its programs, meaning the services or
Yeah.
the products that it's offering to solve needs and challenges, while also investing in what's sometimes called administration or overhead, but what it really is the beating heart of the organization that will allow it to continue and to do more for more people. So, as a nonprofit business, a nonprofit corporation is able to sock away, save some of its hard-earned, hopefully surplus revenue. That then becomes the quote profitability that, instead of being reinvested for shareholder dividends, is often referred to for stakeholder dividends. So to be able to do more for more community stakeholders in service of the mission of the organization. I hope that provides some context. And again, I can give examples for more clarity for you and your listeners as well.
No, I think that's fine. One of the things I would love to hear your perspective on is when you're talking about managing a team and managing staff, do you feel that there is a difference when you are within a nonprofit organization versus a for-profit organization?
The main difference that I've found is the operating environment, and here's what I mean by that. The nonprofit staff and leaders that I've gotten to support and supervise and manage and empower in the various organizations that I've led, more often than not, and almost to a person, come to the work with passion, commitment, and dedication second to none. The reality of the operating environment that I alluded to is, at least in the American social impact sector, in my lifetime, and I know beyond that, it may be shifting for my daughters and the next generation's lifetime, nonprofit staff and leaders, more often than not, are getting a lower financial investment in their salary, sometimes in their benefits and
Mm-hmm.
packages, than they may have otherwise in certain for-profit sectors. So there's almost a haircut that's given, and hopefully not expected, but given historically in the philanthropic and nonprofit sector. I'm starting to see some changes in the attitude and hopefully the morale of that. Having said that, burnout is a real thing, and so while money can't solve a burnout on its own, investing in nonprofit leaders and staff across the country and across sectors will pay a dividend that's going to help society as a whole, because these are, again, the frontline workers who are really working day in and day out to solve so many seemingly intractable challenges.
So can we highlight a little bit what I would say? Because I do want to come back to this idea of what drives an employee to a specific organization. So for those out there who don't understand, why would an employee or an employee be paid less within a nonprofit space?
The conclusion that I've come to so far, and it can be a moving target, is a so-called scarcity mindset. And I've heard about it, I've seen it in operation across different organizations. And what it really means is a uh, an assumption or an understanding that the nonprofit sector is sort of the fabric of the front line working to solve these organizational and systemic challenges in America are somehow uh, uh, being rewarded by their purpose. And what I mean by that is there's an expectation that by being a social worker or a program officer working to solve poverty challenges or healthcare challenges in under-resourced communities, that the meaning and purpose that those folks are getting somehow counterbalances the 30 to 40% salary reduction that they may be getting vis-a-vis a private corporation doing similar or related work. And a
Yeah.
lot of that has been driven from the funding mechanisms and the starvation cycle, I'll call it, of when nonprofit corporations don't always have enough income and sustainable revenue to reinvest in themselves.
So when you're in that situation, right? So there is a limit to funding. And you may not be able to keep up with the big boys, if you so to speak. What have you seen work in your experience in helping drive engagement with employees that are highly motivated by passion, highly motivated by values? Obviously, they want to be able to pay their bills too. So, if you cannot pay them more, what have you seen work to maintain engagement and therefore retention?
Yeah, great question. And it's not going to solve for each person in each case, but more often than not, a few elements in the organizational culture can go a long way. One is transparency, so being open and sharing to a point with staff on the balance sheet, the comings and goings, the financial health of an organization, and inviting them in some cases to be part of, if not direct fundraising, certainly to be ambassadors for the organization and encouraging them and empowering them, assuming that they're proud of the work they're doing as part of a team to share that out with their networks. That inevitably pays dividends in terms of bringing new donors and sustaining partners into the organization. Another element is empowerment. And so, as a leader, and I'm an executive director of a nonprofit, and I've led other nonprofits both as an executive director and as a lay leader, a board chair. A lot of it is playing to people's strengths, and I will speak self-servingly for me, surrounding myself with talented people, investing in them through professional development and their salaries to help them in not only their own job development for the organization that they're attached to today, but also for their career development, the trajectory that they're going on. And more often than not, that has served the relationship well and created some level of stickiness from the employee back to the organization that's employing them.
I think you're in a very unique position. And I think there's so much we can learn from your history with leading these teams. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I feel like there has been a significant shift, I would say within the last 5 to 10 years, of what not only what I have seen, but also what I'm hearing other leaders say in the for-profit space, particularly with our younger generations. Like they want to do work that ties to something they're passionate about, ties to something that that they value, that they feel is ethical, even within a for-profit space. So they're being in a sense, they're not just picking a job for a job, they're picking to work for this organization for this specific reason, this specific task. And in part, some of the challenges that come with that is when you are not just going for a paycheck, it can be a lot harder to figure out engagement because that person wants to feel that their growth is happening maybe quicker than others and that everything they're doing, even in the most mundane things at that entry level position, is tying to that bigger mission, vision, passion that they feel inside. And I think that has been a challenge for a lot of leaders who are who have dealt with people more traditionally, who were like, well, if I reinforce you with a bonus or merit increase or whatever, the incentive, like what people value and what is incentivizing performance and therefore retention is shifting. And have you seen that a little bit, or have you been hearing something similar? Because I feel like that's we're seeing that shift take place.
Well, I am validating everything you just said, and I'll say first of all, as a big kid, that applies to me. So 15 years ago, or something when we're recording this, and I was making a deliberate and proactive move into social impact work, and the nonprofit world being part of that. I'll talk more about that in a second. Part of the reason that I did that was because my daughter, who's now in college, but then was just learning how to talk and maybe ask, what does dad do? I wanted to say that I help people, and that's my job, and that's what I do every day. Now, flash forward, she and her, I'm seeing it through her classmates, her colleagues, and peers. They have, even if they're not naming it as mission driven, they have that purpose that you just described front and center in whatever it is that they want to do. So now, how do I bring that as a leader into any given organization? Part of it is creating a learning organizational environment. And here's what I mean by that. There's more than any one of us can tackle. So in the case of the organization that I lead today called COPE, where we are a 26-year-old or young grief and healing organization helping families living with the death of a child or a loved one, there's much more need and demand and much more learning that any one individual can do. So while I know already that I'm not a grief professional, I'm surrounded by them on our team and empowering them to not only push the edges and the envelope of what's possible and innovative in the field, but then also to report it back and bring it into our culture and into our programs and services. And then that becomes a really positive iterative process because A, we as an organization are able to do more for more people, and B, the folks who are helping to innovate and build the business are very much invested in seeing that impact and that work sustain and scale on their watch. So that really ends up being a really positive process of a so-called learning organization.
I like that. Because it's so often in just conversations and because I feel like there's a lot of shift that has happened
Mm.
in, like I said, I say roughly the last decade. And you and I have had conversations. We're in this kind of like sandwich generation,
Right.
in the sense that like boomers were before us. What they were incentivized, motivated by, how they were rewarded for work is very different than what workplaces look like today, with what workers want, need versus how employers are trying to reward them. And so, particularly, and why I love what you're talking about is this idea of kind of like this learning based environment, is I feel like there's going to need to be a shift
Mm.
that happens on the for profit side. Because what incentivizes and motivates a majority of our workforce is shifting. And so, to a certain point, people don't want to stay in the same role for 15 years. That's what my parents did. They had one job, they stayed in their whole career. That is just not going to work for, I think, younger generations. They want more. They want to feel like their work matters, it's driving to some like a greater good, if you will.
For
And
sure.
that's why I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned from our nonprofit colleagues and the environments that they have bestowed, because it's not all about money. Money's great. Again, I just want to keep saying, I'm not saying don't pay your people. But what I'm saying is I think in order to maintain the talent you want, to recruit new talent that you want to keep, you're gonna have to figure out something more than just the salary. It has to be more about the culture you create within your organization, within the team, that helps fulfill this need to that my work ties to a purpose, a greater vision, a greater mission, just in general, like that it's bringing greater value.
Well, you said it beautifully, and I'll give clarity to a term I used earlier for listeners in case it's new or unfamiliar. Thinking about a single bottom line approach to uh, work and society and corporations. And what that typically means when I hear it or use it is that money and profit is the end all and be all. And certainly in American corporations of all kinds, there's a mandate for it to maximize shareholder value. So
Yep.
that's where a single bottom line approach can come front and center. And increasingly, I think you're right in terms of the 5 to 10 year look back. And I've been heartened by some shifts that you're mentioning and alluding to, that there may be some new structures coming our way, which will take shape, because the alternative to, or an alternative to, a single bottom line approach can be a double or triple bottom line approach. And what that often means is not only is money one of the bottom lines, so that never goes away because we need that for all the reasons that we're talking about, to sustain, to reinvest in ourselves, but it's not necessarily the only bottom line that matters. So a second bottom line can be people, and
Yeah.
investing in missions and organizations that are solving some of the critical human needs that we've been talking a little bit about on this in this conversation. So profit and people, there's two P's. And a triple bottom line can be if the corporation, the business, the enterprise is also working to solve some of our critical planet and climate issues. So a triple bottom line approach looks at profit, being able to reinvest in the enterprise and the people who make up the enterprise. A second bottom line of making a difference and moving the needle to help people across the country and the world, and then also our planet. So the nonprofit corporate but business model, or profit business model, one may be a little bit more headfelt, and one may be a little bit more heartfelt in their traditional trajectories. I'm optimistic that there are some hybrids and ways to come together that will serve that double or triple bottom line, and certainly serve the interests of this next generation that you and I are talking about. We're going to increasingly be looking for job and career opportunities where they're able to move the needle on both or all three of those bottom lines.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I think we're in an interesting pivot point in general, particularly in the US, in kind of how business is done, what people want, how they're being incentivized, how they're being rewarded. You know, there's just a lot of area, I think, that we still haven't settled, I think, from post-pandemic world. And I think we're still I think corporations are trying to figure it out. I think employees are trying to figure it out. So there's a lot at play here. So I guess I would say, just in thinking through, because I think I know what you're going to say, because I feel like it's been a message in here, but to put it very bluntly,
Yes.
if you are a leader who is unfamiliar with nonprofit space, and knowing what you know, and you say, I'm a for-profit leader, I have teams that are coming in that are different than what I'm used to. I'm having a hard time figuring out how to engage, motivate, retain the talent that I really want to keep. Not the ones that I'm trying to replace with AI, but talent that I actually want to keep. What would be some tactics or thoughts you would share with that leader to say, hey, here's what works in my environment that may not be what would be your go-to solution?
Yeah, the two ways that I would do that, and they overlap, and I'd encourage anyone and everyone in the position you're describing to find creative ways to do this in case their operating budget doesn't give a clear path forward. One is to find together for each of those employees real meaningful professional development opportunities, so the organization makes an investment in them. Sometimes it's with hard dollars. Sometimes you can find some pro bono coaches, courses, seminars that are going to inform the work that employee is doing. And then again, as I said earlier, will be able to bring back and own in their own way for the sake of the organization. And the second is to expand their horizons. And again, these aren't mutually exclusive. Professional development can include investing in and sending a nonprofit staff member or leader into a new for them environment, whether it's a symposium, a conference, an affinity group that's either directly mission aligned with the work of the organization, and sometimes beneficially, tangentially aligned with the mission. So really to broaden their vantage point. And again, that's both inspiring and empowering for them, not always comfortable at the beginning. Some folks need a little bit of a push or cajoling to get into those spaces, but inevitably they will be inspired. They'll learn something, they'll add value to a new for them community, and then be able to harvest and bring back some of that hard-earned knowledge and wisdom back into the organization. So it helps them broaden their horizons and
Yeah.
benefit the organizations in terms of its own scope and scale.
I like that a great deal. You know, one of the things that I have often mentored new leaders on, or leaders who are struggling, who are like, I don't have the budget.
Yeah.
And I like to tell people you don't always have to spend money in order for your team to feel like you're invested in them. So if I can add one idea out there,
Please.
one of the ones that I always thought is I would ask my team members, like, because you should be meeting with your team regularly anyway, but like if they have a goal, like a specific professional development, a skill that they want to work on, something they want to improve, there's two ways you can take it: something they want to improve, or maybe a path they're interested in pursuing. So say the team that you're on, like this may not be the right fit for them long term. It's a job they can do, but it's not necessarily where they want to be, or they have a dream of promoting into some leadership position, succeeding you, or whatever it is. One of the things I always worked really hard to do was to try to leverage my network
Mm.
to create mentorship relationships, like around something specific, right? So mentor mentee, that costs nothing. So if your network is open to being somebody, if you know people and you reach out to them and say, I have this team member who wants to grow in this way, is trying to be challenged in this way, would you have time to be a mentor to X person? I have yet to have a person tell me no, and it's free. It costs me nothing but my time and people that I know. And it, interestingly enough, several of my team members ended up building such a good network and like good relationship that they ended up promoting and having these mentors become advocates for them, sponsors for them in other roles within the organization, that put their careers on a different trajectory that is so much bigger and better than anything I could have hoped for them, right? And so I would just encourage people to not feel like everything you do has to be based on, it has to be a budget line item. I mean, leverage what you know. In part of this, it comes down to you have to know your team, and you also have to know your network. But I always like to tell people, it doesn't have to cost anything. But yeah, it's fascinating, like and it's also good about bringing people together. So I don't know. Do you have a thought about that?
It's so beautifully said, and I realize I've benefited from those kinds of relationships as well, whether or not they were done by design or more organically. And you're absolutely right. And you've asked a couple of times pointedly about some unique elements in the nonprofit sector. So I'll just highlight what you just said. And whether it's a thought partnership or someone who's seasoned and perhaps a volunteer or giving their pro bono time around a particular skill set that the nonprofit business is lacking in its infrastructure. One thing that jumps to mind right now is that the organization I lead right at the moment, COPE, where we have a new volunteer board member who's a marketing and branding expert. She's partnering with our part-time marketing staff member at two different levels in terms of knowledge and expertise. And it's self-serving in the best way because A, it's helping the nonprofit staff leader to get better and stronger in her job
Yeah.
at COPE, at our organization. And B, it's strengthening the relationship from that volunteer and becoming an even stronger ambassador for the shared work that we do. So it's a really strong and sound strategy, and we'll have a lot of benefits for across the board. So well done.
I just think people want to help other people, especially if you have teams that are truly showing up with the best of intention, and really are looking to grow, and you really want to keep them engaged. Again, there's so many amazing, amazing ideas that cost nothing. But that's an easy one. And especially if you're in a unique or niched environment, the more you can help that your team like make those connections and network, again, most people get jobs based on who they know. I hate to say this.
Well,
Like, I don't actually know what the percentage is. I need to review, like, look this up. But like the cold emailing, I don't know, especially as you go up the ladder. Most of the time, how you're going to get that job is because somebody who knows you, who knows the opening, knows your experience, whatever, is going to say, "Hey, I've got somebody. This is who you need to call." And so I think that we as leaders, that is a gift we can give team members, is helping them start to build that network early, but making sure that they're respectful of the relationship and know that what is expected there as well. But I just think that's a huge opportunity that I don't think we take advantage of enough as a leader.
I'm validating. That's been my experience more often than not only in my own career development, but also in fundraising and sales. Those kinds of warm relationships inevitably end up being the ones that are more transformational and less transactional. And the same thing for those kinds of mentorships that you just highlighted. And I'm thinking now, as we're talking of even more examples, because those are really authentic, more often than not, really authentic, mission aligned, heart driven relationships where two professionals at two different points, perhaps in their career, can come together around a shared mission, and it benefits both, and hopefully the organization that they're both committed to. So it's really great, a great idea that you just highlighted.
Well, hopefully we're hopefully like this is something you can add into your strategy for the year for your talent management strategy. Like I said, I have had the benefit of like working for companies that actually had an entire mentor-mentee program. So I do think that's some of it. But I've also worked for companies that had none of it. And then I just said, nope, this is what we're going to do. And the people who took advantage of it has positively affected their career. And interestingly enough, those are the team members and employees that still keep in touch with me to this day. And I think it's because they knew I not only cared about them, but I was invested in them.
And that's what I mean by a transformational relationship rather than a transactional one. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, Adam, this has been a wonderful conversation. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else you want to share with our group?
I just want to thank you, Kimberly, for the good work you do in building a community that coalesces, and please include me front and center as you are today, in having open and frank conversations about culture and organizational development and challenges. You made a reference earlier about not yet all being outsourced to AI. So in the meantime, and hopefully for the long foreseeable future, the authentic human relationships is what helps us to make or break, in some cases, the organizations that we care about, and in many cases lead into the future. So I don't take it for granted that you're here and creating this conversation, not just with me today, but more broadly. So thank you for the work you do.
Are you sure I'm not just a facsimile? I'm not a hologram.
I can vouch for that. Yes.
No, thank you very much. And thank you for what you do. And like I said, because, I'm so appreciative that we have a tremendous diversity of cultures and experiences and why people do what they do. And I'm just grateful that you're willing to come on and share your thoughts and your experiences. I just think there's a lot we should and could learn from each other. And I'm just grateful that people are willing to come on and talk about stuff. And, but yeah, no, thank you so much. And we'll definitely have you on. I'm sure AI is going to continue to be a hot topic. I think we're going to do like what we do with most things is we're going to embrace it too aggressively, and then there's going to be a swing back where we'll find some middle ground where it makes sense and where it doesn't. But it's going to be a little interesting, rough ride for a bit. So let's see how this goes.
That sounds about right. Well, again, thanks, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to join you today. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of We've All Done It. I know your time is valuable. That's why I am for as little BS as possible. Hopefully, today's episode has sparked some new ideas for you. If you would like to learn more about the We've All Done It leadership framework or how to work with me, please check out my website at KimberlyJBenoit.com. Until next time.